Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining another session of OAB's Online Learning Hub. My name is Dina Al-Atasi. I'm the Head of Innovation at Oman Arab Bank. Some of you may have attended yesterday's session that Eric had presented on pitching an idea. Today, Paul Butler from GBM will be talking you through the process of turning an idea into a proof of concept. For more information about our workshops, please visit Oman Arab Bank's social media pages. If you have any questions during the presentation, please ask your questions in the chat window and they'll be read out loud and addressed by our speaker. If you'd like to join the discussion at the end of the presentation, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Lean. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this fourth session in the GBM stream. I'm making an assumption here that quite a lot of you will have attended the earlier sessions, but just as a bit of an aide-memoire, this is really the final part of innovation that we started with, and looking at business cases and then into how do you pitch your idea. Having done all that, how do you actually make this real? There's a number of things that we want to talk about. You will probably, if most of you have seen, what GBM is. GBM is a fairly large organization in the region. We are now into our 30th year. We cover a lot of technologies. Predominantly our history was around IBM, and also we've grown quite a lot in Oman itself, over 120 employees, and we do lots of different end-to-end solutions around the general IT world. So I don't want to spend too much time on those few slides because, as I expect, if you've been into one or two or three of our sessions, you will have seen them before, and hopefully by now you know GBM and you know what our solutions are. So for today, I'd like to just remind you, this is the last in the current series. There will be more, watch this space. Replays will be made available. And just as a quick summary, our General Manager in Oman, EDDY, did a very interesting session a couple of weeks ago around innovation. How do you actually get across multiple ecosystems and really drive innovation? We've been talking for a number of years now about digital transformation. I think that's just part of innovation. And I think that, in the current climate, with the current challenges we have, these are only going to accelerate. Eric then spent yesterday and the day before talking about a couple of subjects about a business model canvas. How do you actually get your business case together, and how to actually pitch an idea when you've got one. It's all very well having these great ideas, and we all wake up in the middle of the night and think, hey, I've got a great idea, but what do we do with it? And so hopefully what I can help you with today is just a few ideas around taking this idea and making it real. It might be called a proof of concept, a prototype, could even be, with enough funding and agreement, a pilot. It could be the first phase of something much bigger. But taking that initial idea. Now, one of the things is, first of all, there's more to come, and talking to Lean before, in June there will be a session around a technique we use called design thinking, and I'll introduce that a little bit later. Some of you may come across it, some may not. So what Eddie was talking about was just, what is innovation? When he put into a word cloud the numbers of words and things like new, customer driven, ideas, things like the business, the thinking, surprising, all those were quite float to the top. And it's what he says there, and this is his words: innovation is delivery of a new creative idea that people will surprise people and think that this is not business as usual, this is something different, but I can also bring real value. It's all very well having an idea, and it doesn't pass the, as Eric used the term yesterday, I think it was, does it pass the so what test? He talked about the business model canvas. This is how you actually help when you've got this idea. Well, let's actually see whether there is a real business case here. We can create something, we can then deliver it. But if the customers don't come and the revenue doesn't come, we don't really have a viable product. So what he talked about with that business model canvas is to be able to really build the business case behind your idea. And also, one of the things is, I've got that idea. How do I actually pitch an idea? build the compelling reason to act. Why is the customer doing it? Is there some regulatory stuff? Is there an end of a budget cycle? Have you got a 90-second elevator pitch? Can you build a one-page value proposition, a flyer, something that will really grab people's attention without giving them 30 pages of technical depth? Prepare and practice, and then actually the client role play. And in fact, the client role play, the final presentation, really ties into where we are going with this particular presentation around getting something ready that is engaging and that the customers will buy into. And also, Eric talked about why are we doing it? Why are you the person to do it? Whether that's you individually or a company, and why now? What again? That comes back to that compelling reason to act. So we have a number of things. How do we actually find a good idea? We all have ideas, lots of them, all of the time. But what techniques can we actually use to find the best idea? We can brainstorm them, typical everyone in a room shouting. We can ask our friends, what do they think would be good? Often we think we know best, so let's just go ahead and maybe we'll sell it to someone later. Or the idea we have is really cool, so it must be needed. Other than that, one of the best one is to follow a trusted method. And we need at each time to see, do they pass these ideas? Do they pass the so what test? So I've got this great idea. Yeah, okay, it's a pretty good idea, but so what? What's it gonna do? What's it gonna help me with? And we have a number of techniques and methods to help with that. And I'm going to allude to a couple of those as we go through this presentation. The first one, and as I say, there is more depth on this coming up in June, around design thinking. This is all about getting to the real requirements, not just what we think the requirements are. Quite often we will build a solution, we will take it to a customer and say, or a potential customer and say, so what do you think of this? And it's like, well, yeah, it's pretty interesting, but I don't really have a need for it. So understanding your potential customer market. Again, this was something that Eric alluded to over the last couple of days. Understanding a particular market, whether it's a bank or whether it's a telco or whoever you're wanting to pitch this to. Understanding who is the customer, what is the market, what are the problems they're actually having. Because if what you're providing doesn't fix a problem that they have, either perceived or maybe it is a hidden one, then you don't really have a justification. And so how will your idea stack up against what they need? Can you justify producing it? Is there a business case? So again, back to Eric's business canvas model. And can you deliver a prototype quickly? Because more often than not, people want to see something. They want to see it down on paper, as in pictures, or actually, hopefully, as a working prototype. So the main points around design thinking, there may be just 3 steps to heaven as the song goes, but there are 8 steps in a successful product launch. And these are the main phases that you would go through in a design thinking engagement. We often run these as a way of finding the real requirements. What's the customer's real problem? What's their pain? So we go through these steps. Each one of these could take a day or a week. We can often do them in a couple of hours. So let's just research the problem. Let's research the customer. Whoever the customer is. It could be a prospect. It could be a venture capitalist who we want someone to put some money into. But let's do the research first. Persona and empathy map. Very, very clear. Very powerful. The persona is actually saying, don't just do this in a vacuum. Actually think of a real person or a role, a bank teller clerk, or it could be a C-level executive, it could be a high street customer. But actually then look at an empathy map, and you'll see more of that later, which is saying, what do they think? What are they thinking? What do they do? What do they say about their challenges in their everyday life? Then make sure you know where you're coming from. If we're saying we want a better way to do millennial banking, or we want a better way to book travel tickets, we need to know where they are today. And where they are today, plus item 4, what are the real pains that they have? And when you've got all those pains against their existing, so pains, challenges, roadblocks, then you start ideation. Big ideas. Go and put big ideas against those pains. So you know that the big ideas you come up with are targeted at particular pains that they have today, because we found it through research. Prioritization grids, this is another technique we will use whereby we say, right, we've got a lot of ideas here which all map to pains. Which are the ones that have the biggest value and are the easiest to deliver? And those will be the ones we start with, and we go into a prototype and a playback. So what design thinking would do would get us to the stage whereby at stage 6, we have an idea, we've prioritized it, we've actually got a pretty good business case done, we know that it's going to fix a known problem inside the organization. So let's see how we can actually build something very rapidly. So the objectives of prototyping is a number of 4 steps. So you must have real conversations with the audience, whoever those stakeholders are, whoever are the people that you're trying to actually propose this to. Don't start building, don't start even documenting on your own. You have to have those conversations with the business case owners, the people who have the problem, right up front. Get feedback. You know, criticism is good. People don't like it, but often it will actually show that you didn't quite understand something in their pain area. You may have thought this was a great thing to do, but when they tell you, well, actually, no, upstream of your idea and downstream, we do this and this and this, and, it would need to be slightly different. So get that feedback all the time. Then we go into how do we actually create a prototype? How do we actually get something that's engaging, that the stakeholders will either sign up to or at least agree this needs to be moved on, this is a great idea, we can see how there's value in it, and let's move it on and take it to the next stage. And the next one is test it. Once you've built something, and it may not necessarily be anything to do with IT code, it could be on pieces of paper, storyboards, whatever, again, test it with real users. Get the real users in. I worked for a number of years at Emirates Airline, and one of the things that I learned was you have to get the end users involved. But more importantly, if you go back to that first stage of design thinking, the research means actually we need to get involved with the users. So go down onto the floor, go into the branch office of the bank, go and look behind a teller and sit with them for an hour or so and understand where they really are. So that when we come to build a prototype, don't just check it out with the IT guys, with even the business analysts. Bring real users in. Bring someone from the branch office in, and actually have them have a look at it. And whilst I said there were 4 objectives, 4 steps to the objectives, there are actually a 5th one, which is repeat 1 and 4. Go around this loop as many times as you need to do to actually make sure that you've actually really understood what the objectives are of the exercise. We may start with a fixed idea. We may have even gone through the design thinking stages and come up with an idea that we think will fix a pain point and has real business value. But actually don't start with the solution, start with the need. And in fact, I would say actually start with the real need, because quite often, unless you actually get involved and deeply involved with your user base or your potential user base, you really don't know what the real need is. I've got a little snippet here from what we use in our design thinking sessions. This has not got any feedback, so it's a rhetorical question. Who knows this man? Anyone under the age of my age probably wouldn't necessarily know who it is. This is a guy in the late 1800s, in the 19th century, built stagecoaches. And the idea was get the mail and the passengers across the Wild West and get them there in one piece. He actually had a very innovative approach. He said, well, actually, to my customers, the stagecoach people who ran them, what do you need from me? I'll ask you, what are your requirements? And actually what they actually said was, we need faster horses because, time is money. If we could knock an hour off the trip from, from A to B, that would really save us money. Now, the interesting thing is this guy is actually Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford thought, okay, yeah, I mean, and they did actually start to breed faster horses for these specialized breeding programs. But actually, what was much better was to say, actually, there's a different way of doing it. You don't just need faster horses, you need something that's similar, but actually very different. And actually what he came out with the idea was he discovered that the real need was actually to get customers from A to B, not to have faster horses. He just wanted the best way. And of course, then they needed to mass produce these and make them affordable. Cars were around, but they were like for the very elite. They didn't do much. They pottered around little towns with guys with red flags waving in front of them. So, as you know, he sold plenty of them just by listening to the customer's real need. He could have gone off into all sorts of, horse breeding programs. So, we've got the idea, we've got the real idea that fits the real need. How do we actually then start to prototype and play back to our customers? And we use these very iteratively. Prototyping, build it, play back, build it, play back. So those steps 7 and 8 actually are very iterative. So make sure, again, you'll see this keep coming back. Make sure we involve real users all the time because they know what the real pain is. Build a quick, we call it an MPV, a minimum viable product. Not a piece of lashed up code, whatever, or just a half an idea. Something that actually could be a minimum product. It does something, it does it well, and it meets a need, and it has value. But be prepared at the first stage to throw it away, or at least to seriously modify it. Don't spend a lot of time making it perfect. We can do all the perfection and all what I call the flower arranging comes later. These are the things to check. Did you miss any key functionality? You sit there and you put these 6 bullets up and you say, this is what we got from the earlier session in requirements, but the guy says, yeah, but we really have a pain in this area on A, B, and C as well. If you're looking at doing storyboarding, is the flow intuitive? If the experience it says if, it should say is the experience of using it enjoyable? There are so many systems around, and I'm sure you've come across them, where there's a whole mass of buttons and fields and everything, and it's just an absolute pain to try and work your way through it. And finally, the always the same one is if your product actually addresses their pain points. If it doesn't, then what are you doing it? When we actually do the prioritization grid, we will map our big ideas against business value and ease of use. Quite often we will find quite a few ideas that are actually easy to produce, easy to do, but have no business value. So why do it? Just features and functions for the sake of it. What we're really looking for is the big idea that has high business value and is relatively easy to deliver. And that's a business case in its own. It's like, why wouldn't you do it? So, prototyping, multiple ideas, prototype the idea. Just do it either in a storyboard or a mock-up. You don't very early on have to reach for the coding sheet. It's not about that. It's about making sure these are aligned to the business needs. Think out of the box and be creative. You might do all sorts of things. You might take it from sticky back plastic on a chair. This is calling it a grow cart, whatever it is, with a shopping list and maps and total amounts. So this is like a wheelchair idea that has within it a map of the shop and everything else on there. The other one might be about a more formal process around fixing people's IDs. And need to actually go in and to basically say, this is the general flow we're going to go through. So you might be here and say, here's my mobile app. And she's very proud of her mobile app. I'm sure if you press any of those buttons, it won't actually do a lot, but it will take the stakeholders with them on something they can visualize instead of a bunch of PowerPoints and or even worse, a 60-page requirements document. So when we get to playback, we're beginning to start to iterate through the design and the build process. these are some of the steps that you should think about to actually create a compelling playback. Demo, if you like, whatever you want to call it. We need to tell a story. It needs to be a logical link through the story that tells us exactly what we're trying to do, what we're trying to actually get over to the customer, the prospective stakeholder who might be the person who's going to give us the funds to actually complete it. It needs to keep them interested. You know, I've seen so many demos where I've got 75 features on here and I'm going to show you every one of them because they're in there. Instead of looking at a business use case and actually being able to flow through them in a nice logical way. Incorporate personas. Remember, we talked about personas earlier, that was around an individual person, and have a role or a person that would allow them to relate to what you're trying to do. And as I say, weave the story throughout to keep their engagement and stop them getting bored. This doesn't need to be quick, it needs to be punchy, it needs to be exciting. You need to get the people to think, yeah, this is really cool. Yeah, I can see there's business value, and actually, you know, you haven't built much yet, but I get the flow, I get the understanding. And what we would do then is start to use this playback method, a number of playbacks. So we will iteratively go through design, build, playback. These are traditional agile methods we would use with development, but it also, you know, takes it much more up the food chain into having at every stage potential business users review what we're doing so that we don't actually have to go back. Playback 0, very much almost like it's probably not much more than the elevator pitch or the one-page prospect that you have. If you're looking at improving branch processes, then you might just walk through the steps. You know, we've seen that you could do this and this, followed by this and that. If you're actually building an application, you're writing some code, then at a very high level, just talk through the compute flow. It might be as simple as this. This is a process where we're looking to improve and go forward with it. No more detail than that. We're just getting agreement that actually if we did this, it would improve the existing process, the existing code, and we would save, you know, a lot of time and money. So playback 1, we then start to actually begin to use some tooling. You know, at this stage, we're wanting to show the logical paths, show the gateways, so show at least the if then else type routing, either within code or within processes. And you can use Visio, PowerPoint, flow tools, various flow tools like IBM BlueWorks Live, which we've used in the bank before, to actually start modeling the solution that we're ready to build. So as I say, it could be a process. It could actually be a set of user interfaces that are flowed together. But at this stage, we're not talking about any UIs at all. This is just the logic flow as we go through. Again, here's Visio. And of course, it doesn't even have to be this sort of level of tooling. It could be post-its on a board with lots of arrows. At this point, I would always say at least someone within the team needs to have a nice mobile phone with a camera on it. Otherwise, do not mess with this comes up, because the last thing you want to do is go away, come back tomorrow morning and find the cleaners clean the board. So any old tooling will do, but you have to, at least at this stage, get, again, the users will sit there, and I've done it a number of times with various organizations where I almost sit back from this and the users will begin to talk about how it could go and how it does go. Because in the end, you know, the business users are the guys who really understand the existing flow. So remember, get all the stakeholders in there, get it right at this stage. Keep going back until everyone agrees this is the process we have today and this is the process that we need tomorrow. Whether it's a formal process, whether it's an ad hoc process, or whether it's an application, a solution, a code that you're going to build. Could even be a mobile app, but how do you actually navigate through it? If we move on to Playback 2, this is where we start to add at least a visualization of what the user interface might look like. We've got the logical flow. Now we want to actually see how people will interact. There are some UI, UX type best practices around. There are all sorts of fancy tools you can use. But at this stage, we're looking for buy-in from the stakeholders, the potential users, using whatever's necessary. There are a number of wireframe type tools around, wireframe CC, pencil doc, iDoc, PowerPoint even, and even string and sticky tape and post-its. Either way, we need to, at this point, validate that the user interface we're going to use could be these two, could be a more formal, these are the screen flows where I'm going to create position, I'm going to validate it, I'm going to look for existing. Each one of these is a UI screen, and we could even go as far as to mock up those screens actually in process tools or designer tools like Eclipse or many other tooling that we can use for mocking them up. The users need to be able to see the look and feel. And here is wireframe CC, where you literally start to build up the look that you have on the system. So again, before we move to the next stage and before we start to actually do any real coding, we need to make sure the look and feel is okay. We don't really want to start to have to change dramatically the layouts and the look and feel as we go forward, because it means rework. And here, go back if necessary, go back and change those mock-ups, those wireframes, to make sure the customer, the potential user, is really happy with what we're doing. So moving to Playback 3, at this point we're really beginning to get to something that resembles a solution, a prototype that we can actually run. At this stage we need to check that we've got any interface services. If we're getting any data from back-end databases, if we're wanting to maybe look up some information off the web, use some services, whatever they might be, we need to actually connect those up now. We could still at this stage be stubbing those out and mocking them up, but actually if we have ability to get to test harnesses, this is the stage to actually start to do it, so that when they actually start to run through and click on next and I get another screen and then I hit submit, I can actually begin to run through exactly what we've got. So this is really the first run through, the first full run through of the solution. We've got user interfaces, we've got test data, we've got interfaces to other systems if available. And so we'll probably spend a bulk of quite a bit of time working towards the final playback. Now the final playback actually sits in Eric's pitching an idea in that area of this is the point where we actually want to go and present the final solution. It's not really a solution at this stage, it's still a prototype, but it is working. This is not mock-ups, this has got real code. I actually like to talk about POCs or prototypes actually as pilot. This is actually a pilot. It has limited functionality, but if it shows significant value, there is no reason why it cannot go live now. We may need to do some stuff around security and reliability and whatever, but the concept is such that it is a standalone capability with real business value. We can add some beautification to it, some tabs, some charts. We might add the corporate colors. But also at this stage, we need to be able to pitch at the same time as playback, the final playback, a scoped development plan. So when the guys say, yeah, this is really great, how long is it going to take for us to go live? How much is it going to cost? What do you need in terms of testing time to get it into production? Have an outline of that ready now. They need to know, does this take a week and $10,000, or is this a year and $1 million? They need to have a flavor of that. So the playback method itself might include all sorts of different objects into our boring screen that we had in the mock-up. We now, what I call flower arrange it, beautify it, make it look nice. Also, we then start to pass back to them the concept of how we would actually get the plan to go to fruition. You look at the wavy line here, the whole point here is as we go through either, these could be individual playbacks. It could be this takes place over a week. It's a very simple idea. We have very simple, we're going to do, so we're going to look at the activities we're going to do, we're going to build a backlog, and we're going to start building it. Each time we're narrowing down until we get to the final presentation, and the customer hopefully will sign off and say, this is great, can I have more of this? And actually, if they say more of this, we could extend this up into much more of an enterprise type playback, whereby we have phases, where we first of all get a lot of transformation of the idea. We do the ideation, then we go into what they call the hothouse here with multiple sprints where we really turn out lots of capability. Each one of these is delivering ideas and capabilities. We pull it all together. We may be doing some enterprise architecture integration at the end, and we're ready to go. Now, this could be 18 weeks, depending on the capability. But actually, the one before could be a very simple idea that we want to do in a week. But we can still follow exactly the same concept. So, we need to sign off on that final payback. We really need them to say, yep, go ahead. Remember, every stage of the day of the process, we have taken the stakeholders along with us. So each time we have actually iterated through the various playbacks, they've been there. At every stage, we ask them, is this what you're looking for? Do we need to change anything? If they did change anything, we went back. We wouldn't go on to the next playback till they said they were okay. So when we get to the end, there'll be no surprises. Hopefully the only surprise will be, wow, that's great, we really want it. They will sign off on the development, testing and deployment plan because in the end, it's their plan. The stakeholders have gone along with it all the way. There's none of this, traditionally many years ago, we would have said, right, here's a set of requirements, we'll go away for 6 months, then we'll go with a big fanfare, ta-da, here it is, and they say, no, that's not what we wanted. So this process is very much in line with agile development, rapid development, and being able to get to a point whereby the business users, the business sponsors are along with us all the time. So to summarize what we've talked about here, present your outcomes. At the end of each stage, at the end of each sprint, there must be a deliverable. There must be something that says, right, okay, this is just a wireframe, but this is what we've delivered. Every time, state the problem and pitch the idea and the demo into your prototype again and again. Keep reinforcing what is the pain, what is the problem that your solution is going to solve. And also, each time, look for agreement, consensus, potentially funding to move to development, testing and deployment phase. If we do this right, really that last one should just be an automatic sign-off, because to a certain extent they're signing off on their product, their project, because they've been involved from day one. So before I finish and open up for questions, I'd just like to first of all thank OAB for allowing us to come and pitch. We have a continuum that we've built here really over these 4 sessions. I think when you looked at what Eddie talked about, everyone's talking about innovation. They're talking about digital transformation, and I think hopefully with Eric's 2 sessions and mine, I'd like to think we've shown you how you can actually take innovation and digital transformation and do it. It's not some amorphous thing. When you look at digitizing, automating problems and challenges, it's very relevant today in the current climate. And I think, I would just suggest that when you go into the hackathon, whilst you're not going to spend, a week doing the design thinking, I would still say that even in a 24-hour pitch period, you should look at actually time boxing what you do. Let's say we're going to spend the first 2 hours just researching, just doing whatever we need to do to find out what we're doing. you hopefully may come with a few ideas before you actually get there. But start to look at who's the person. Always assign this back to a persona, a role, a real person, so that you know that you're doing it on behalf of a real user, not just a general idea. And then through into the other stages of looking at the business case, prioritizing, and then going into this prototyping. And again, the prototyping, start mocking it up on a piece of paper, on whiteboards, or whatever you have there, before you leap into coding anything. And I think with that, I'm really looking forward to hopefully being able to unlock from Dubai and get it back into Oman. And when we get past this crisis, hopefully I will be able to join you at the hackathon when we do it, either later this year or early next. So with that, Lean, I'd like to pass it back to you and see.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you very much. I think that was very helpful in terms of outlining the process, and you touched on a few very key points. For example, the iterative process that we need to follow and ensuring we continuously engage our customers or stakeholders to get their feedback and ensure that the solution that we're developing is aligned to their requirements and their needs. So these are very important points. Thank you so much. We'll open up the opportunity for our attendees to ask questions. I think we had a question from Nawal. Nawal was asking how the lean methodology works with the design thinking principles. I think you addressed it in one of your slides, but if you'd like to perhaps go into it in more detail, Paul?
I think, I would call these not necessarily a method, but almost a state of mind. I mean, lean, agile, design thinking, they're all coming from the same stable to a certain extent. It's around gradually building up capability. Don't start with a fixed idea of your solution. Be prepared to go back and iterate, but also all of these methods, and there are many other methods as well, always take the stakeholder along with you. I mean, I've spent nearly 50 years in this IT business, and I spent so many years, where a requirements document comes out and IT and development go off and develop it, by which time the business has moved on. They have different challenges or whatever. So I think, whether it's lean, whether it's agile, whether it's design thinking, I think design thinking comes a little bit before the game. It's more to do with actually looking for that idea in the first place. So one can lead to another.
Thank you, Paul. There's another question from Rami. He was asking if design thinking principles can be applied to any project, or is it specific to tech projects?
Oh no, absolutely. I would encourage you to go and have a look at design thinking and search Google. It actually started as a method for real designers designing furniture and and artifacts. So it's been applied to IT, but actually it goes way back before that. There's some very interesting books on the subject. There are a number of organizations, along with people like IBM and GBM and others, who have taken it and put it towards technology. But actually it started life as nothing to do with technology.
I hope that addresses your question, Rami. Are there any other questions from our audience? Okay, there's another question from Mohammed. Do you recommend any particular books or references to find out more about design thinking?
What I'll do is I'll put a link on the end here. There is one particular book that is freely downloadable as a PDF. I strongly recommend it. We talk a lot about it actually in our design thinking sessions, about this guy in America who basically came over to Europe and decided, why can't I actually work with with the switches? They're all upside down, and the taps, I can't work with them. What's wrong with the design? We have some amusing videos as well. So I'll attach a few of those to the end of this before I give you the copy of the deck link.
Thank you, Paul. And Mohammed will be running a workshop on the 3rd of June that focuses specifically on design thinking principles. So please join the workshop if you're interested to find out more. Eric has shared a few reference in the chat group if you'd like to refer to it. I think that's all for today. I don't think we have any more questions from our participants. Thank you all once again for joining us. We've had some regular participants throughout our workshops. We thank you for your support. We hope that you find these very useful. If you have any feedback for us, or if you have any specific topics that you would like us to cover, please feel free to reach out to us and share these with us. Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, GBM, for running these very interesting workshops for us. And we are looking forward to tomorrow's workshop at 11 a.m., which will focus on personal branding and how to build your own personal brand. We have another workshop at night tomorrow at 9 p.m., which will focus on how you can obtain funding from VCs. That will be delivered by IDEO. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks very much, Leen.